So let's talk. Dagen McDowell, co-host of The Bottom Line, right here on fabulous Fox Business. Katie Pavlich, editor of townhall.com and Fox News contributor. And Tammy Bruce, also a Fox News contributor and author of Fear Itself. Fear Itself. Katie Pavlich, did he get it done? Was it a reset? Did he need a reset? What did you make of it?
He definitely got it done. I'd say there's some fat that could still be trimmed off of some of the answers in terms of talking about things that don't necessarily affect the lives of the people he needs to vote for him. But he did a great job talking about electric vehicle mandates, about energy. One thing that really caught my attention is he went after Kamala Harris for her electric vehicle mandate, including for trucking. And he mentioned that you would have to rebuild every bridge in this country because the trucks are so heavy.
That's a great point.
And so it's like these things are just not practical, not to mention people don't want them and they're too expensive. But he's clearly drawing a contrast here, not just with Kamala Harris, but with President Joe Biden. And I thought him going after the way they took him out and saying he had the right to run for president. And now you have a woman who's in charge of the Democratic ticket running away from the press on answering questions. So whether the American public will reward him for coming out when she is hiding, we'll just have to see. But we have a debate agreed to on both of them, September 10th. We'll see if they agree to the other two.
You know, not to get too lost in this, Tammy, but the fact is, Katie is right. Trump is right. To this day, we don't know exactly how it happened that the president of the United States, who was essentially presumptively nominated in primaries to head up his home party again, suddenly lost his job as the nominee. I don't know if he lost his job as president or not. I can't figure that out either. But folks don't really understand that. They don't know that. I think that's sort of a dangling modifier.
Yeah, and it should be discussed and explained because it's not just that event that is inexplicable. The entire process has been how Biden got elected, hiding in a basement. How did Kamala Harris get chosen? What have they been doing for the last 3 to 4 years? Who has been in charge? Who's the people responsible for this disaster? Who is really responsible for the Afghanistan airport catastrophe? Who's responsible for the, well, it's a Competitive Enterprise Institute notes, $15,000 a year cost to households because of regulations. Who's done that? And now, who is Kamala Harris? All these questions come up, and I think Trump points out to them in some fashion about authenticity, honesty, transparency. Who are these people? Why is Tim Walz being portrayed as some kind of aw shucks moderate Democrat when he's Bernie Sanders? How does that work? So it comes from all of that from the beginning. The American people have to realize that this has been the ultimate in gaslighting, and we've been lied to continuously, which allows them to be, to do what they want while telling us not to believe our lying eyes.
Dagen, come to you on this, though. Was this a reset? Because Trump has not had, by some critics, Trump has not had the best 10 days of his campaign. And I was talking to Vivek Ramaswamy about this last night. Others have raised the issue. Going after Brian Kemp in Georgia, a few other miscues, kind of off message. Now it looks like with Walz coming in, and he is a far-left guy, no matter how much he all shucks, as Tammy said. Is this a campaign reset coming out swinging just 2 days after they put this guy Walz up?
He doesn't need a reset. He just needs a focus.
Focus.
He needs to focus more. And of the one thing I wrote down from the press conference, it is, of course, I've never heard anyone campaign on a tax increase.
Yeah, don't you love that?
Boom, shakalaka. But he can hammer that even more.
You've heard me say that. You've heard me say that.
To run for president,
For the last several decades.
I want a pile driver.
Yes.
On that issue and on all policies that matter to the American people, because he has the opportunity to paint Kamala Harris into a corner because she is saying nothing about policy. So the Democrats want to raise taxes on the vast majority of Americans. The Democrats want to get rid of the Trump tax cuts. They weren't for the rich. They were for the working man and woman. The Democrats want a lower standard deduction. They want to tax the businesses that you work for or run. That means fewer jobs. That means, again, a stranglehold on you and your family. That is more of the last 3.5 years of intentional suffering and hardship that Harris and Biden have inflicted upon you. So keep hammering the tax cuts, but also everything that Kamala Harris has helped do has been a handout to Iran. They've enriched Iran. They have enriched climate crusading cronies, and they've enriched people who had the privilege of going to college and getting a 4-year degree. They have told roughly 85% of all Americans who didn't have a college degree they didn't get student loan debt. I mean, don't have student loan debt.
70%.
Including people not in the workforce, it's more 85%.
But the point is that...
but they've told those people, screw you, you don't get anything, and they're doing more of that, and she's bragging about it. Hammer, 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 hammer on that.
Well, all right, Katie, so that gets to it. I mean, was there enough of that in the press conference today? Because this is
There was a lot of that, followed by other things. So we could like trim off the other stuff and just focus on those things. I think that would be the most helpful for the president. But yes, I mean, if you can focus on what he is saying in terms of substance, he wins every time. And the fact is that, Kamala Harris has not produced a single policy position on any of these things. She's allowed her surrogates to speak for her. And the claim has been made, well, they just threw this campaign together. She's only had a month to do this. Well, she ran for president once, and they've ran away from all of her far-left policies. And if they were actually popular for the country, they would be running on them instead of running away from them. And they're lying to the American people when they say that they have any plans that are different from her policies of the past. They will implement them if they get elected.
She's worse than anything that Biden's done in the last 3.5 years. If you get rid of hydraulic fracturing in the United States, that destroys 65% of the natural gas, 65% of the oil we produce, more than 70% of the natural gas we produce. That crushes every household, period.
Can I just
Who would
add
run
something?
on that?
Let me just...
And loses Pennsylvania, by the way,
well, and
which wraps up the election.
Ultimately, when you've got the details, Dagen, you understand these things. Kamala Harris can't speak about them because she doesn't understand them. She's repeating things that whoever that anonymous cabal is tells her what they're going to do. She can't explain it. She can't defend it. She can't tell you why it's good for the country. That's why she can say nothing. They will be desperate. They won't agree to 3 debates. Maybe they'll just do the 1. They're desperate to hide her, like they were with Biden. There's something wrong with Kamala Harris and the nature of what she understands. Just like for a different reason, there was something wrong with Biden. They will avoid it completely, and the American people cannot accept silence from people that have lied to them for 2 generations.
Well, I thought it was fascinating at one point. He was defending Biden.
Yes.
I mean, I just thought that was interesting because that brings out this business. It's like we just had an undemocratic transfer of power in the United States, except that whatever 200 million or 250 million voters had no participation in it whatsoever. And that's something that I think sticks in people's craw. They know that. They know something. There's two things that happened really wrong. One of them was the shooting of Butler, Pennsylvania, and no one has figured out yet this Secret Service catastrophe, and it's a huge cover-up with the FBI, right? And the other one is this. A cabal just removed a president in what would normally be called a coup d'etat. Again, I like to do the economy. I don't like to vary from that so much, but I think these are hot political topics, and I'm glad Trump at least got to them.
Well, he had a moment of his comedy today as well when he was talking about his ear. He said he got shot in the lobe, which he got shot at the top of his ear, not his lobe, so that was pretty funny. But in terms of the question of, yes, there is something seriously wrong when Biden and the White House won't explain why he's staying in the presidency but isn't capable of running again, how Kamala Harris knew all about this decline, and all of a sudden she's now the nominee, and she gets to take over at the last minute, claiming that she knew nothing about what was going on behind the scenes. They've always accused Trump of breaking norms. This is not normal. And they also claim to be the party of democracy. And while they were trying to get people like RFK Jr. out of the Democratic primary, filing lawsuits against him, trying to keep him off ballots, they didn't have a primary. And now all of a sudden they just switch out their candidate. And she expects that she can just walk into the debates that were previously negotiated, even though she wasn't the candidate. Like, she's entitled to that. It's pretty amazing to watch.
I think so, too. I mean, I really think it's a big issue. Tammy, one thing bothers me. The Secret Service discussion is it's out of the mainstream. It's out of the press right now. Now, Congress is away. There is a task force, blah, 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 in the House. I don't know what's going on. There are Secret Service agents who were at Butler, Pennsylvania, Butler Field, who should not be at work right now until we find out what the story is. And I think America is acutely aware of this problem as well as this so-called coup d'etat problem. I wish more of that had been coming up in the press conference today, although Trump, was valorous in what he did. But this is a big thing, and Americans are scratching their heads. And you're starting to read in the newspapers now conspiracy talks. This was a conspiracy. This was a plot. This was Iran. I have no idea about any of it because I don't have any idea, period.
Well, that's how conspiracy theories also start to rise,
Yes,
right? People don't, nature doesn't like a void. And so it's inviting this kind of problem of conspiracy theories. There was new body cam footage that was released about the officer who went up onto the roof. Slight reminder about what happened, but it's been an extraordinary cover-up after a former presidential candidate, almost murdered in front of the world, and yet it's now almost like, oh, well, next. I worry that it's like the Las Vegas shooting, the massive shooting at the concert. We still do not know, and it's just gone away. This is a problem, but it's not helpful when conspiracies begin to develop, and yet I have to say, for someone who is vehemently against that dynamic, is that it's understandable. And after the Russia hoax and the FBI's fingerprints on that, it's now not so strange to think that there was a conspiracy, but we've got to maintain some kind of focus and vigilance because it is an outrageous, frightening dynamic for the American people. And then cover-ups come into it. It's one of the other things that Americans don't like. Kamala Harris's likely role in covering up what was happening with Biden. That must also be discussed at length.
Dagen, affordability crisis among middle-class working people is not a cover-up. They know it very, very well. Mr. Trump must address this again and again and again. I don't think he can talk about it too much.
No, absolutely not. It is all on the backs and shoulders of Harris and Biden and what they've done. And E.J. and Tony wrote about it. $7.5 trillion added to the federal debt, $1 trillion in cash spent out of the Treasury Department, $280 billion annually that people are paying just on their outstanding credit card balances. And their wages, real disposable personal income, you like numbers,
down,
has fallen.
Paychecks have fallen.
Right.
It's the single biggest. It's the single biggest worst part, I think, of the Biden-Harris legacy.
Real disposable personal income's fallen more than 6% in the last 3.5 years, and it was up 20-some% under President Trump. It is all. This was all avoidable. You don't. Where did the money go? They're borrowing $2 trillion and running a $2 trillion deficit this year. That's a recession-level deficit. Where is the money going? Well, you were intentionally crushing people at home. And you want to buy a house? You can't buy a house. Prices skyrocketed, mortgage rates soared, and people
rent.
Right, and they have done, despite the fact they know it doesn't work. They have never changed policy, despite in the face of knowing that it's hurting people
they blame
and it's
Trump.
failing.
No, they blame Trump. That's the one. They always blame Trump. The other day when the unemployment rate went up, they blamed Trump.
It's like, what?
Who has been out of office for 4 years.
So much power. Whoa.
He's not around. I don't know where he is.
You want to know how badly government sucks? They can't protect President Trump's life. That's how bad government sucks.
Well, there's that. I agree. I mean, all these things. I mean, I think on the whole, Trump did pretty well. You know, these things are never perfect.
Of course. He did.
I know.
Yes.
No, that's not. You're all perfect.
Thank you, Larry.
Katie Pavlich, Tammy Bruce, Dagen McDowell, thanks.
Thank you.
Be sure to catch Dagen with her co-host Sean Duffy on The Bottom Line, weeknights, 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fabulous Fox Business.